Coogs house. The Houston Cougars have two McDonald's All-Americans in the 2025 class, but will they have three? Should they have four?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Andorth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making your first listen each and every day when you're on the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us what your McDonald's order or other fast food order of choice is. Going to be talking about the McDonald's All-American game a lot in this episode that's brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. More on that fun later. Best place to go get bets in on the big game coming up very soon. But we got a lot to talk about today revolving this McDonald's All-American game announcement release. Houston does get two players in. We're going to talk about those guys throughout the show. Chris Sinek Jr. and Isaiah Harwell of Link Academy and Wasatch Academy, respectively. There's a snub there because if you can't tell, of the four signees Houston has in the 2025 class, three of them were very serious contenders for that list, and one of them did not make it. We're talking about Kingston Fleming being snubbed as well. Guy deserved it every bit of the way, and talk about why that's kind of a travesty of sorts. But off the top here, first and foremost, Koa Peat is a McDonald's All-American, and he may be a Coug. Now, I think it's interesting to follow this recruitment. If you are brand new to Houston Cougar basketball or new to the recruiting trail or just haven't been paying attention because it was so early on in the recruiting trail when some of this stuff was happening, Koa Peat is like a top 5 pick in the 2026 NBA draft kind of prospect in the class of 2025, right? He is a top end talent, 6'8", 235, 240, very fluid, uses both hands well, shoots the jump shot well, plays in the perimeter, etc. He's from small town. He goes to a school called Perry Public School in Arizona. I think that's in the, I'm going to try and get this right, in the Tempe area. Anyway, I'm not super familiar with Arizona geography, but I think I read that and looking stuff up on the guy. And frankly, in his top 5, he's got 2 Arizona schools, Arizona State, and then 3 Texas schools, Houston, Baylor, and UT Austin. And Houston's kind of dabbled at different points of their recruitment as having kind of an edge. And, about a month ago, there was a crystal ball placed on On3 that placed him at Arizona. Everyone, I think, just kind of said, okay, he stays home, etc. But in the last 48 to 72 hours, sometimes since January 22nd, he's been marked as warmer on the Coogs. If you're following recruiting, that means someone got some intel that he's thinking more about Houston than he was previously. On the 22nd, 24/7 wrote an article in which he was open to all 5 schools and had not really narrowed it down or really kind of shifted at all. How you pick between 24/7 and On3 and all those things are, kind of up in the air. It's really who you're trusting and what the reporters actually are and stuff like that. But I will say a lot of the Arizona hype, I think, is surrounding this idea that he's going to go there and play. Now, things that I know are important to Koa, and talking to everyone, the consistent things that are important to Koa Peat in becoming a Wildcat, Coug, whatever, right, are that he wants to have, within the basketball sphere of things, freedom to move around the perimeter and be a perimeter forward, place to play a lot, start, etc. He also wants to win. He's probably a one and done. And if you're, keeping score at home, that means his 1 year in college is going to need to be a very successful season if he wants to win and also be a one and done, right? Like Carmelo Anthony is the kind of thing we're thinking of here, right? And he's that kind of prospect. I think it's fair to assume that that's a valid concern of his. Arizona does have like a commitment from Bryce James in a later year, and they all, I think, feel like they're going to get Braden Burries, who's a kid that's connected to Bryce James, which is probably the bigger part of the Bryce James commitment, but they don't have that commitment yet. And I think the important part of this is that Koa, instead of signing early or at the first window or whatever, is stretching this out and waiting. He's playing the waiting game and seeing what rosters look like, what guys declare for the draft, what guys enter the portal, what guys shift where, and whose roster looks like what at the end of the season. It would not surprise me for Koa Peat to not make a decision until like after the college basketball season is over. I just really think that there's that much at stake here for him to try and get all of those boxes checked. Again, playing on the perimeter, playing out, getting the ball a lot, playing a lot, starting, and also being on a winning program. Houston does actually offer him all of those things. The one thing that I have not mentioned that Houston has a harder time with than like in Arizona or Arizona State is the proximity to his family. Koa Peat's a big family kid. Part of the reason the Samsons love him is he's a big family-oriented kid. His brother played in the NFL as an offensive lineman. He has another brother that plays at Arizona State as an offensive lineman. He had one brother that played defensive tackle at Nebraska. Offensive lineman, offensive tackle, defensive tackle, big guys. His father, Todd Peat, was an NFL offensive lineman as well. I found out in doing this, I guess Todd did live in Houston, was a practice squad guy with the Oilers once upon a time. But those guys are all in Arizona, or all home base in Arizona if they're still playing somewhere, right? And so that home court advantage of sorts is working for them. I will say though that Arizona State doesn't seem to offer him the chance to win. They would need to do some very big time revamping of that roster, which I guess you can do, but they're not set up to win next year right now. Not the level that he's trying to. And then at the University of Arizona, it would take some significant changes to how they play to make him a perimeter forward. I mean, I'm not saying you don't bend your roster to your talent, but that's not really what that program's been about. And frankly, it's not really a spot that I see him fitting in like that. And so Houston kind of combines all of that, would play out there for conference games. And then, honestly, I would imagine there's some level of NIL package that could fly family back and forth, whatever, to any of these options. Now, bluntly, if he doesn't pick Houston, as much as it pains me to say, I'd almost rather him pick Texas, because then Houston doesn't have to see him in conference play. With Texas being in the SEC and all that, he's that kind of good. Like, you don't want to play against him. Kind of good. Now, he's been a stud since he was like a middle schooler. He played in the high school Pangos All-American camp after his 8th grade season, and very much fit in, and it's kind of like continue to play to the hype everywhere he's been able to play. I do think that part of the reason you're seeing things shift towards Houston is bluntly the success they've had, right? When it was back in November, December, he's looking for a winning program. He's seeing what's happening. He's like, okay, maybe we want to stay home and play in Arizona. They've got as good a chance as Houston does. But in the last month, in the last 4 days, Houston's had a pretty strong showing as far as like why we're ready to win and compete and contend at a high level. You've also seen like big showings out of Arsenault and stuff like that, guys that he could play with. And you also see playing through power forwards. I think the interesting thing here is that he really fits more of a Jarris Walker mold than a Jawan Roberts mold. But I either way think he fits in this team a lot. I do think the year of Jarris is what opened the door to this being a possibility, because Jarris is very much the prototype. Jarris was a little bit bigger and might have had, certainly in high school, like a little bit better 3-point jump shot. But there's a lot of fluidity in what Koa does that I might not have said Jarris has. Both are really good passers. I think underrated aspect of both Jarris Walker and Koa Peat's games is how good a passer they are of the basketball, how well they move it, how well they see the floor, how well they see the open man. I kind of think I'd give the jump shooting edge to Jarris, but not by a lot. I kind of think I'd put the ball handling edge to Koa, but not by a lot. So again, splitting hairs here, but that kind of an athlete to join the 2025 Houston Cougar class would be tremendous. And it sounds like, if you're following along, that may be more here. Bluntly, my 2 cents, this is not reporting. This is what I'm figuring out by looking at what he values as important and what's going on here and what's just how these things play out. Is if we get to April and like Emmanuel, JoJo, somebody that is not just running out of eligibility, Milos, somebody declares for the NBA draft, and there's a starting spot open, and if you're calculating spots here on the Houston Cougars, I kind of think he picks Houston. And I know that I'm going out on a limb there, but truthfully, I think if he's got an indication that he can play for Samson, fly his family back and forth, and start at the power forward spot, I think that's enough for him. Now, I could see him starting alongside JoJo. I could see both of them playing together with JoJo being the low post, right? I don't mean to say he couldn't play with JoJo, but you also bring in talented number one center in the class, Chris Sinek, and that may, eat some of those minutes. And I frankly think Sinek will also fight for the starting role. I think you've got really 3 freshmen already signed that will, if I'm being honest, all fight to start, if not have a spot when they show up. And they're that good. And I know that's going to ruffle the feathers of some listeners that maybe don't like seeing freshmen start or don't think that's wise, but I think that's the kind of talent we're talking about coming in here. And we saw it work with Jarris. It didn't seem like a talent dropped off or anything like that. And so we'll see what the roster looks like as Koa gets closer to his decision. But if you start hearing a lot of pro hype around JoJo Tugler, and I think he's earned that too, I don't think it's unfounded. Well, that might be opening the door for Koa, right? If you see a lot of, conversations about like, hey, Emmanuel might really be able to, make the jump and get to be go be a 2 guard at the NBA level, that might be pushing things in that direction. Now, Koa is a McDonald's All-American. He would be the 3rd in the 2025 class if he were to choose Houston to come to U of H in this class. And I will say that I kind of feel like he should be the 4th because we had a Houston Cougar get screwed. And I want to talk about that 1 second because I like to talk about that kind of stuff. But first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, couple teams, both the Big 12 quarterbacks, endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook, and whether it's predicting the final touchdown, calling the MVP, coin toss, halftime show, anything going on with the Super Bowl game itself. FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Download the app, head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet $5 and you can win. If you win, you score $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Park Rangers locked on Coogs here. Looking at some Houston Cougar basketball recruiting updates. We talk about Koa Peat potentially getting warmer on the Houston Cougars in the opening segment. Koa is a McDonald's All-American. A pair of Houston Cougars we'll talk about in a minute are also McDonald's All-Americans. But perhaps the most surefire thing I felt about a McDonald's All-American coming to Houston was Kingston Fleming's, and he got snubbed. Now, as I look at these rosters and things like that, I will say that, obviously all 24 people selected are very talented. And I don't mean this in a way that necessarily disparages or upsets. And I don't want to say that any of these kids shouldn't feel like they've earned that right. But leaving Kingston Fleming off of the 2025 McDonald's All-American Game roster feels indefensible. And I say that because I, as of the time of this recording, cannot find any, period, any recruiting ranking service that has him ranked lower than the 3rd point guard in the 2025 class. Some have him higher. I cannot find for the life of me on any recruiting ranking somewhere he is ranked below 22nd in the country in the 2025 class. Many have him higher than that. Yes, I do think that there's some other stuff going on at play here. I'm not going to beat around the bush a whole lot. There are a lot of guys on both of these teams that are committed to big blue blood programs. Houston just moved into the Big 12. There are a lot of guys in these high school All-American games that are, currently enrolled in more of the academy kind of places, the places that play on ESPN already and have kind of a national notoriety to them. Bluntly, both of the Houston Cougars that made the game are in those kinds of programs and have a more of a national following. I kind of get that, the vibe that was important here. I'd also point out that there are a handful of these guys that have, through their own I don't know how to put their genetic disposition, they're tied to NBA guys, right? And I don't mean to say that they aren't also good. Again, I think all 24 of these guys, it's a really talented class. That class of 25 is a really, really talented class. But I don't look at any point guard in this group and feel like, you know what? I see what they did there. I see what they did there. I mean, even the number one point guard in the class on some rankings, Darius Cuff, who is at IMG, 6'2". I certainly don't watch him and think he's definitively a better pick for that spot than Kingston Fleming, right? Kingston, if you're following along, is from San Antonio Brennan High School. Has been a key target of the Houston Cougars for a long time, and good old public school kid from San Antonio, Texas, that is absolutely wrecking it. He's got San Antonio Brandon ranked in the top 25 in America. They've got 2 losses on the season after playing as national schedules they could get put together in the pre-district season. They lost to a school named St. John's in D.C. and a school named DeMatha in Maryland. They beat Allen out of North Texas. Some people have them as the best public school in Texas. They beat Dynamic Prep, a prep school in North Texas as well. Beat schools from California, schools from the South, schools from all over, and it's all on the back of Kingston Fleming's. It's all driven by Kingston Fleming's running the point guard spot. Kingston didn't play Nike EYBL. He stuck with San Antonio Futures, a Puma club, right? He didn't play 3 stripes and that kind of stuff. He stuck with being a loyal athlete with his Puma club, and it feels like there's some politicking in this. Now, there also could just be, more familiarity, and I get that too. I don't understand how the national media could not have an understanding of what Kingston Fleming's doing. I think the biggest daunting thing here, though, was it feels like a lot of those academy type of folks had a real niche on this, right? And again, Houston's not immune to that. 2 of the 2 commits they had that are playing in this game are at those kind of schools. I'm not anti that at all. But those same academies, when Brennan was trying to schedule this as tough a non-conference or tough a non-district as they could, those academies and stuff typically didn't want to go to San Antonio and play Brennan. They didn't want. It felt like a lose-lose to them. What are we going to get out of playing a high school out of San Antonio, Texas, just a good old public school that so happens to have some good basketball players at it right now? If they beat the academy, it's the win of a lifetime for the academy, for the small school or the public school, and the academy looks embarrassed. If the academy wins, it's like you were supposed to, right? There's reasons they wouldn't do that. And honestly, I worry that kind of hurts here. And I know that Kingston is not necessarily like publicly going after anything himself. If anything, the response from Kingston Fleming has been very congratulatory to his future teammates, right? Like he is very much handling this much more bluntly professionally than I just think it's messed up. The kid is one of the best basketball players in this class and is splitting hairs if you're trying to pick other point guards ahead of him in this class. And no one has him below the 3rd best point guard in this class. You got 2 teams of 12 people with at least 4 point guards on the board. You tell me what happened. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And I think he's got every right to be upset. He'll never be outwardly upset. He'll just go into the bank of things that motivate him. He'll win a national championship at Houston, go be a top player in the NBA draft, and have a long career where this doesn't matter. But I think it's right and okay to be upset about it now because I think he got a little screwed. Now, a couple of Houston Cougars that did not get screwed, we mentioned, are heading to the McDonald's All-American game. I want to talk a little bit about their games and kind of how they fit in with things in a moment. Before we get too far into that, today's show is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax as well. This message comes from Intuit TurboTax, and taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were ever going to get any money back, and then waiting and worrying and wondering some more. And now taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes, you and your taxes, their undivided attention as they work on your return, and we get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert will find you every single deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. This is now what taxes are. Get an expert at turbotax.com. Only available with TurboTax live full service, real-time updates, only available in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Park Ranger Locked on Coogs here, and I did say several times throughout this that Houston has a couple commits in the 2025 class that are kids at academies that are big time prospects and are going to McDonald's All-American game. And I want to make sure we don't just sit here and dwell on will they get Koa, will they get Kingston. We need to celebrate the accomplishments of some future Cougs while we're here too. And I don't want to just like make this a negative Nancy kind of episode. Chris Sinak, the number one center in America, plays at Link Academy in Missouri, is from North Louisiana, I believe North Louisiana. And he's 6'10", 7'4" wingspan, crazy athletic for a big guy. Very coordinated, bouncy. And by athletic, I mean like that athletic coordination where he moves like a guy that is so much, I don't know, he just moves like a guard as far as the way his like running motions and stuff like that are. He's fluid enough to use that athleticism in like counter post moves and stuff like that. He's good on his feet. He's got fast twitch, super aggressive. I like watching him attack from the high post, like that 10, 15, even 17, 18-foot area. Great touch. And it's a decent free throw shooter, like decent enough that I kind of wonder if that could be indicative of like him growing into more of a shooter. Still not there completely yet, but certainly doesn't look like anything's wrong with his jump shot form. Might just need more time on task. We shall see. Tremendous, and this is the most Houston Cougar thing about him. Tremendous motor. Never quits. Always goes for the rebound. Always has his hands tipping on the ball. Tip, that kind of stuff, which makes him feel like a bigger JoJo Tugler, honestly. I mean, like he's that kind of an athlete. Bigger in terms of taller. His wingspan's actually almost the same. He's the kind of guy that, just being blunt about it, if he could go straight out of high school into the NBA, he probably does. He's projected to be a top 10 pick presently in the 2026 NBA draft. Again, number one center in the class. Someone in that top 10 in the 2026 draft is going to be a center, right? He went to the MBPA, the Player Association's top 100 camp for the class of 2025, and he was MVP of that camp. They play a lot of, and it's not pickup, but it's kind of feels like pickup kind of games throughout that, and he really showed out and showed off. Really impressive athlete. I think what's interesting about him is he committed probably earlier than he needed to. He had his pick of schools. Houston was in on him early, and he was kind of a late riser in the last like 24 months in this recruiting thing. He was not like the top center in 2025 back in like his sophomore year of high school, right? He definitely has worked his way up those charts. That's both a testament to his work and discipline, what he did in Louisiana high school circuit was done at Link Academy, what he did on the AAU circuit and stuff like that. But it's also like, for what it's worth, each of those steps you'll notice there's like more coverage. People are seeing what Houston saw in him a long time ago, and I think that loyalty is a big deal to him. That's why, and I know that's going to be with the next guy as well. I think that's why he stuck with Houston. As Houston found him early, he thought it would be worth it. Now, I like him a lot. I think he's like the best high school version of a prototypical Cougar big man I've seen in a long time. That doesn't mean that he's necessarily as good as a Roberts or a Carlton or whatever necessarily right away, but he's going to push to start at center as soon as he steps on campus. He's just too athletic and good to keep off the floor, like all these guys we're talking about are, frankly. And for what it's worth, I'm not going to get to mention Bryce Jackson's run by the accomplishments that other guys have that he wasn't necessarily in the running for, but Bryce Shadow Creek's had a tremendous senior season. I mean, it feels like every time you see his name on the stat sheet, he's getting double-digit points and double-digit either assists or rebounds, high in the other, couple steals, couple blocks. I mean, he kind of fills a full stat sheet, and he's not necessarily in McDonald's All-American kind of conversation, but we probably shouldn't just like leave him off anyway. But on Sinak, I'm really impressed by what you see out of him. He's going to be playing on the West team, again from Louisiana, in the McDonald's All-American game. On the East side, which I don't think made a lot of sense personally, but Isaiah Harwell will be a shooting guard on the East team. I don't know that they necessarily divided up actually geographically, but he is a 6'5" true two guard. He is a shooter. He can light it up from the outside. I can't see a consistent 3-point percentage on him being reported places, so I don't want to misreport, but he can shoot it. What I think is fascinating is at 6'5", with a long wingspan and 185, 190 pounds, he does a really good job of using that shooting to his advantage in other aspects of his offensive game. So he takes guys off the bounce, he kind of slow plays them, he gathers steps, he understands that he can get by guys with the pump fake and go if he's trying to close out on a shooter. And frankly, he also understands the gravity with which he plays with as a shooter opens up other guys if he's, on a fast break and trying to pass the ball or whatever. Like, he's a really, really smart basketball player. Played at Wasatch for a long time, the Wasatch Academy. It's one of these big basketball kind of places they play in national schedule and all that. I also think in watching so he had some kind of big injury stuff as far as lower legs kind of stuff goes. He's fully recovered. I think it's impressive watching a senior film is that you watch him and he's still super aggressive defensively, throwing his body around and stuff like that. And you kind of worry about a high school kid that's had, major knee injury or whatever. Like, will they recover and go have the same kind of balls to the wall attitude? And Isaiah Harwell definitely still has that. And so I think that's kind of telling to who he is. Now, Isaiah said something when he committed, something to the effect of Houston was in on him early and stuck with him throughout the recovery process. And another kid that Houston found early before the national media was necessarily on him as a high-end recruit, identified, found what they wanted, and the loyalty paid off because this is a kid that lost some interest from some big-time places when he was hurt. And Houston didn't fade, didn't go away. That was a big deal to him. Kudos to the staff for being that committed and knowing what they saw and the kid was going to come back. I don't know that everyone would have done that. So again, props to them for that. Really, really talented class with just those four guys: Kingston, Chris Sinek, Isaiah Harwell, and Bryce Jackson. I don't think they're done. Koa Peat, again, is the kind of athlete that if he commits to Houston, you make room on your roster for him. And I do think that there's a chance that happens. I think this has all come up a lot in the last couple of days as far as focused on the 2025 recruiting bit because of that shift from Cristobal to Arizona on 3 to Koa Peat being more neutral according to 24/7 last week and now being warmer on Houston as of the start of this week on the 24/7 site. I think people are interested as to what that means. Obviously, Class 2025 is one we're really excited about and we're going to brag about a lot. And if they add to it, we're going to keep on talking about it here each and every day at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked on Coogs, primary for the Locked On podcast. Now is your team every day. Go Coogs.